So, good morning and welcome to the podcast for this week. Paul and I were both sort of a little bit moved this morning, actually. I don't know if anybody happened to see the podcast that was on, I think, BBC Radio 1 with Jamie and Spencer. In fact, ultimately, they brought in Grylls. And I must confess, Paul, had no idea, really, because I saw that this morning, that Spencer Mathews, his brother, had been, at the time, albeit short-lived, the youngest person ever to summit Mount Everest. And in fact, sadly, had perished sort of on the way down the mountain, thus effectively handing over that title to Grylls. And please don't take that the wrong way, that's a fact rather than a sort of opinion. And that certainly got me to thinking, Paul, really about, what some of the stuff that you and I have done, some of the risks I guess we've taken in some regard. And I know certainly you and I like to talk about some of the circumstances we've put ourselves in regarding how does that transfer to business, how does that transfer to work, etc. And I certainly think that, for me, that kind of triggered some of those thought processes this morning. And I think one of the things that we always say, to start us off, is I always say that the summit of any mountain is only halfway. And I think that that's something that, people quite often forget. And sadly, the facts of Everest are that more people actually perish on the way down and the way up. And I think when we sort of start to talk about planning, and our planning cycles, the summit's only halfway, you've got to get back down again. I think it's probably not a bad place to start.
No, exactly. I was amazed when we did the Matterhorn, which we've spoken about before on this podcast. I was amazed that it took us about 4 hours to get up and 5 hours to get down. You just think going downhill's easy, but it's a lot harder, and it took us longer. Yeah, and I can absolutely understand why people put so much effort into getting to the top and then perhaps haven't got the energy to keep that concentration going. Often when you hit your goal, and unfortunately, maybe the goal should be to come down, but maybe the goal is to hit the top. The risk is sometimes, I suppose, to take your foot off the gas. But my gosh, yeah, I was amazed at how hard coming down the mountain was when we did that Matterhorn. I know it doesn't really equate to the Everest. Obviously, you've got more experience with that than me, Tim. But yeah, quite shocked on that one.
Yeah, for one, I've always found coming down harder on my knees, my body. And actually, I think what was also actually quite interesting is I think psychologically it's harder, whether that's because there's kind of no longer mission in sight and you've kind of done it or not, you've kind of made the summit or not. And suddenly it's almost as though psychologically you're in sort of no man's land and you're just trying to get through this moment. I think that probably equates to business. I think I talk to a lot of people at the moment that are sort of saying, I'm in a kind of doldrums, I'm in kind of no man's land. It's kind of, we are locked down, but we're not. And, the vaccine's coming, but it's not quite here. And it's not dissimilar for me to that kind of descent. It's just that kind of not quite sure where I'm going or why I've lost that drive and that purpose.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today? Obviously, we both military guys, both spent some time in Afghanistan, and then, coming back to civilian life, there perhaps isn't that camaraderie and adrenaline rush or challenge that perhaps quite a lot of us, probably you and me, probably one of the reasons we joined the military in the first place. So certainly a couple of years ago, we set ourselves that challenge of doing something silly each month to try and do. And Tim, you're the expert, or very much more experienced in mountaineering than me, and you convinced me to get involved and do. Go and do some reasonably high altitude mountaineering in Europe, in the Alps, and obviously the Matterhorn was pretty awesome. I was very thankful you dragged me up and dragged me back down. What do you think? What's it like? How are you equating the adventures and the adventurism and the mountaineering with perhaps how life was when we were younger in the military?
I think for me, and I think it's the same, it's probably true of business, it's like the microcosm of pressure, isn't it? Kind of you and I stand in front of businesses and we talk quite regularly about, what happens when you're under pressure, what happens if you've got to make difficult decisions, what do you do when you want to be the Spartan leader, but perhaps it's not the right thing to do at that moment. And I think for me, one of the things I've found is obviously the military taught us to deal with that and gave us a skill set, but certainly the mountaineering thing has enabled us to kind of stay current, I guess. And I think personally practice what we preach a little bit, Paul. I think I remember you and I, Gately PLC being one of our sort of larger clients. And I remember you and I sending them a video message. We were just running a developing leader program and we had to turn back on Mont Blanc, if you remember, the weather conditions weren't good. And we had to take the right but the tough decision to say that, okay, we've spent a week in the Alps pushing it, but actually it's not right. And the right decision is to turn around and go back down again. And, neither of us wanted to do that. But that was the right decision to take. So, and I remember talking to those lawyers later and them saying, well, actually, that was pretty cool to kind of listen to you guys tired, exhausted, practicing what you preach. So I think for me, it's a way of you and I staying current and perhaps proving to some of the delegates that we, still sort of practice what we preach.
Yeah, it's very easy to be an X this and an X that, but it is. Yeah, I think it means that we can still put it in practice, make sure it works. The day, pretty much the day before, I think it was, before we made that call, we were doing some training, weren't we? And I suppose it sort of highlights our how we bounce off each other, how we interact, how we sort of lead. Almost it isn't one of us leading and one of us following. It swaps and changes during the day and during the situation. There was that time when you were following me up to the, I think we were in the evening, weren't we? Coming up to the hut in the evening, and I was breaking trail, and you very nicely came up to me and had a chat with me, wasn't it? That was quite funny. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Tim.
Yeah, I think we should probably set the scene. It was one of the most bizarre days of my life, actually. For any of you that have been to Chamonix, you'll know that you can get the Aiguille de Midi, rather, cable car right away up to the top. And there's two weird things. It's either full of proper skiers and mountaineers, or fundamentally Japanese tourists. So I found myself standing in a cable car, dripping in sort of ice axes, crampons, skis and all the gear to go with it, genuinely feeling a little bit Bear Grylls, since we were talking about Bear earlier. And yet stood to my left is a whole load of people in fur coats and fur jackets. And I just remember standing there thinking, one of us has got this well wrong. And you come off that cable car at the top and then you go kind of, there's like a gate on the end and the tourists are all stood taking pictures. And you have that quite cool moment where you go through the gate and out onto that erect, come down that knife edge. And we put the skis on and we skied sort of, obviously it's effectively the top of the Valley Blanche, but you ski across. And then we had probably a 300-400 meter climb back up through probably some pretty deep snow. And I was quite tired, actually. I think we'd been in the Alps a couple of days by then and you were feeling pretty strong. So Paul took the lead. And for anyone who's ever done this before, breaking trail is spectacularly hard work. So in other words, being the person at the front, pushing the snow out of the way. And it's not unlike in business when you're the person with the new idea who's trying to invoke change, you're the person pushing that thing forward. And it's very much like that. So Paul's kind of driving the snow out of the way and I'm just in his tracks behind him, really. So I guess the cyclist can probably equate to this. You're probably pushing out 30% less energy or whatever behind. And I could see Paul battling on but refusing to quit. And I just thought it's really, really interesting because Paul's absolutely capable physically, arguably stronger than I am in the hills. And yet actually I could see that the right thing to do was take over a bit. But I remember thinking to myself, his tires were at nearly 4,000 meters of altitude. If I just suggest that Paulie gets out of the way, he's going to take that as me thinking he's not up to it, not strong enough, not good enough. And there'll be a row and it'll get like messy and it'll be no good. And it was just, I remember sitting there thinking, how do I tell Paul I'm keen to do my stint on the front to give him a breather because he's done an amazing job this far, rather than making it sound as though, actually get out of the way, big lads. We want to get there tonight. I don't know. I guess we didn't punch each other. He didn't punch me, so he must have done something right.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I suppose we teach a lot of this. It's changing your style or changing how you say it, not changing what you say, but changing how you say it, depending on the situation, depending on the people. And you're right. If you come up and gone, Paul, you're looking knackered, get out the way, I'll take over. I'd have bitten. I'd have been like, ooh, ouch, not happy with that. I'm strong enough. I can keep going. We'd have had an argument. But the way you just said, oh, I think it's my turn now, I think we're halfway, I'll do my half, was like, oh, brilliant. And I suppose we can all learn from that. There are loads of situations where you can say what you want to say. And if you say it one way, the whole team gets angry and hates you. And if you say it the other way, everyone's like, oh yeah, well done. Thanks very much for that. So yeah, I suppose it's that chameleon leadership or that chameleon, being a bit lighter foot, changing how you're going to come across depending on it. I think a lot of new leaders have the same thing. I was perhaps less experienced than you in terms of mountaineering, and I knew that, but I was out front and I was like, I'm gonna prove myself here. I'm strong. I'm going to keep going. And thinking back in retrospect, when you get promoted, when you become a leader, when you're in charge of a team, you can sometimes feel that, can't you? You're like, oh, I've got to be out front. I've got to be the one doing more work than everyone else. I've got to be proving that I should have been promoted. I've got to prove to everyone that by doing more work and doing their job better and harder. And all that was doing was trashing me. I was getting more and more tired. We were going slower and slower. And really the best thing to do was to delegate to someone else to take over. And my God, it's easier. when you're in someone else's track.
You were stood between me and beer and cosmic sweat as well, which is never a good place to be standing.
Was that when we met the Russians, or was that another day?
That was when we ended up drinking at 4,000 litres with two former Spetsnaz ice climbers, which is a story for another day. And for those of you that are listening, it ended exactly the way that you think it was going to end fundamentally. And it's probably still highly classified. But anyway, actually, Paul, you make another point there, which I think is quite interesting, which is newly promoted, isn't it? And I think, for me, when we start to talk about adventure stuff over the military, there's a common chat that Sandhurst, the army, make good leaders, and yes, of course, good leaders come out of the army. But actually, leading somebody when you're an officer, you've been to Sandhurst, the troops haven't. By definition, they have to call you sir and fundamentally do what they're told. Is an easier, in my view, situation than when you're trying to lead peers. And I think one of the things that we see quite a lot are people promoted from within the team. I know that's what you're pretty passionate about, isn't it?
Yeah, it happens a lot. I mean, it very rarely happens in the military, and because of what we're going to talk about, the issues and the problems and the clashes that happen. But in business, it happens quite a lot. You're doing a brilliant job in the team. Someone identifies you, the business, the company identifies you as a future star, and they promote you. And now all of a sudden, fun Paul, who used to go down the pub and have a laugh and joke around, is now in charge.
Were you ever fun Paul?
Exactly. So, all of a sudden, fun Paul is now not so fun Paul. Fun Paul is boss Paul.
Is that the Paul that bought that loud blue suit?
Yeah, that was a lovely suit. I like that. but that then causes all the problems, because you have mentally got to switch that gear, and also the team have got to be mature enough to understand that you've changed position now. You're not the same person that you were, and that can cause a lot of problems. We've got a phrase, haven't we, Tim? Whinge up, not down. And the big problem with when you're promoted, when you used to be in the team, is that in the past you used to go to the coffee room, you used to go to the pub, and you used to sit there and you gossip and whinge and go, head office don't understand, and Dave from accounts, he's an idiot, and I don't like this person, and you let off steam in the normal way, and you have a good whinge about it. If there's now a mismatch, if you're the boss, you can no longer come in there and start whinging to what used to be your team. It used to be your people that you used to work with, who are now your subordinates. You can't do that anymore. So you always whinge up, never whinge down.
I'm laughing because I can remember a day on the side of a hill on a very hot day on a military exercise. Remember? So Paul and I were both troop commanders at the time, and we were leading. I think it was like long range reconnaissance stuff, was it? Long range reconnaissance patrols and stuff.
We were out for a while, yeah.
So I think to put it into context, we haven't slept very much for probably, I don't know, a week, 10 days or something along those lines, and we'd walked a really long way carrying big rucksacks and all of the kind of usual stuff. And the exercise was coming into a bit of a culmination, and Paul had his team and I had my team. And whilst we've been largely operating separately most of the time, we came together for this particular evolution of the exercise. And in fact, I think we were trying to escape and evade Paul, weren't we? I think we were moving around RVs or something along those lines. Anyway, and I remember coming in and seeing Paul, thinking, oh, it's brilliant, there's Paul, great, perhaps have a chance to, grab a coffee together or something, whilst the boys were sorting themselves out and stuff. I remember Paul goes, Tim, I need to talk to you about the thing, the mission, the map, and I'm like, Paul, what are you talking about? This definitely wasn't fun, Paul. And I was like, I don't understand. I can't. What is he talking about? Paul's like, come on, you need to over. Let's go over here. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, sort the kids out. And Paul's like, no, you come over here. I was like, right, okay, fine, yeah, sure. So I go behind this tree. don't read too much into that. I mean, he's a good-looking boy, but he's not that good-looking. And Paul just looked at me and he just let rip. And he was like, this exercise, these people, I'm trying really hard not to swear now. He's like, this is outrageous, that is outrageous, this is no good, that's no good. And as for this bloke, I just shoot him myself and save the enemy a job. Like, what is going on? And Paul just went berserk for about 40 seconds. I sort of stood there and went, all right, mate. Yeah, perfect. Totally agree. And he kind of hugged me and he went, thanks very much, and went back to being, the sharp military officer that he is. But what was going on, Paul?
I do remember that, actually. Yeah. Well, there was a load of things. I was tired, grumpy, not eating that much, etc. Lots of pressure, and that was what the military was doing. It was an exercise. But I couldn't, I had to put the face on. I couldn't go to the guys, this is rubbish, it's awful, I hate this, blah, 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 because that would have pulled them down, dropped their morale. They would perhaps have lost respect for me. Oh, well, maybe Paul has no idea what's going on, maybe I didn't, but I was trying to pretend that I did. I was trying to come across.
If you were asking me advice, you definitely did not know what was going on.
but because I was the boss, and at that point in my team I was the highest ranking person there, I couldn't whinge and grump and unload. So, and it was only when we just happened to bump into you and it was like, right, let's go and have a good whinge, let it all out. It's good to have a whinge, that's why we all do it, but you just can't do it to people who work for you anymore. You've got to whinge at your level or whinge to your boss. And that's otherwise you just drag everyone's morale down and you make everyone lose confidence in the plan. And Tim, you've said it before, a bad plan executed well is much better than a great plan executed poorly. If you've just got to get everyone to put their shoulders to it and drive, and even if it's not a great idea, if everyone really tries hard, you've got a good chance of getting it done. I mean, my absolute worst annoyance is when someone walks into the room to give a briefing, to tell people what's going on, to tell the team what's now changed, and they start off with an apology, and it just ruins whatever you say next. You've just destroyed. If you walk in and go, team, I'm really sorry, I don't want to say this, but head office are telling me to do it, there's no overtime next week, or we need you all to work 2 hours later this evening, I'm really sorry, it's not me, it's my boss. Absolute garbage. You've just ruined everyone's you've brought everyone's morale down. You've probably lost a lot of respect for yourself, and you've made the team no longer respect you or the chain of command or your boss or their boss. And so walking in and starting with an apology is just the worst thing in the world.
I think the irony is there. I think the irony there, Paul, sorry, greedy, but I think the irony is people think they're building rapport, don't they? I think that's the thing. People think, oh, I'm equating with a team, I'm building bonds with my team. And, actually, if we go back to some of the high pressure situations you and I have found ourselves in, actually, what you've got to do is provide reassurance and direction. You don't need to be a Spartan, but provide reassurance and direction. And in fact, as you say, like, oh, well, sorry, I mean, I always laugh with presenters, don't we? When we train quite a lot of presenters, and it's, don't apologize for a slide you've just shown a 500 strong audience. Don't show it. And it's a similar thing, isn't it? It's that kind of, they think you're building rapport with a team, but actually what you do is driving a wedge between the two. And I totally agree with you.
Yeah, you've just ruined any confidence that the team has that you've got an idea, you've got a plan, you've got the solution, that the rest of the head office or whatever has got a plan. You've just ruined it all by walking in there and whinging. Unfortunately, you've got to do that whinging beforehand. And if you really disagree with the idea, the change, the plan, whatever it is, go to your boss, say, look, this is a rubbish idea, I don't like it, it's not going to work. Do all that beforehand. Eventually, you've got two choices. You either accept that your boss is telling you to go and do it, or you resign, I suppose. You say, well, I'm not doing it. I don't believe in it that strongly, and I can't possibly stand up and go and say that. But if at the end of the day, the boss may well know more, will hopefully have a better understanding. You, if you're going to stay in the company, have to put your face on, walk in there and go, right, guess what? We've got a great plan. Let's do this, and come across like that. Any issues you've got to sort them out beforehand with your boss and your boss's boss.
Well, I think it ties quite well to what we were saying about being part of the solution. Again, harking back to the climbing stuff, it's very much about problem solving all the time. And perhaps that's something that's just occurred to me is, okay, we need to get from here to there. That's not an option. When you and I came out of that hut at dawn the following morning and we had to get down Valley Blanche from top to bottom, we had to get to the bottom. There's no other way down. So actually, it's a question of being part of the solution, working the problem, finding out what we can do, isn't it? And I think with the whinging thing, it's a little bit the same. It's like, okay, fine, you might not like what you've got to do, but there's probably a reason for it. Understand the outcome, understand the in order to, if you like, as we always say, and then actually be part of the solution. And if you don't like the solution you've been given, don't point out where it's wrong. Find a better one. And I think there's a lot of negativity we're seeing on the news at the moment. And in fact, if we could just be a bit more, okay, let's focus on finding the answers and moving towards the solution rather than highlighting all of the problems, I don't know, maybe we start to make a bit of a difference. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you all again next week. Thanks very much, Paul.